This morning, if you'd like to turn to Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33, I'm going to be reading from the New King James Version. Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitude away. And when he sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So he said, "Come." And when Peter came down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him, and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
This morning we have a guest speaker with us this morning, Curtis Burks. Curtis and his wife Rhonda were part of the group that went back to Spain several weeks ago and did a missionary work there. And through the generosity of everyone here, we were able to contribute to that work. And so this morning, Curtis has agreed to present a lesson for us and to give us a little bit of information about that trip. I'm sure it's nothing to do with the fact that he has a new grandson that happens to be here. But anyway, it's a honor to have you with us here this morning, Curtis. Thank you.
Good, Adam? All right. Well, good morning. As Rich said, I am Curtis Burks and my wife Rhonda. We are here from Fort Myers, Florida. As I look around the room, I know several of you. Some of you are family, some of you are close friends, and to some extent, you are very dear to us. Some of you grew up with us, continue to grow up with us, and we very much enjoy being here. I want to let you know that Rhonda and I have new titles that we're very proud of. So Rhonda is now Nana, and I am now Granddad. And I would prefer you to address me by those titles, please. I wear it like a badge of honor. I am Ashton's granddad, and Rhonda is Ashton's Nana. I'm also Joshua's father, but that's not as important now. So it really is a matter of convenience. There's the reason that we're here is to meet our grandson for the first time. It's our first grandbaby, first grandson, so it's a big deal. So as a matter of convenience, I'm also here to present to you some information regarding the trip that we took to Spain. The church here helped support that work financially, but more importantly, the church here supported it with prayers. And on the screen, you'll see that there's a phrase that says sharing in the work. And that's exactly what you all have done. Without that help, that assistance, that support, this work could not have been accomplished. You are as important as the people that put their foot down in the country of Spain. Together, we achieved this work that went on in Spain. The scripture reading this morning was from Matthew chapter 14. I want to point out a quick verse within the scripture reading, and then we're going to finish with this same event as well. This morning we sang some songs that talked about stepping out in faith, and there's something stirring within me. There was also a phrase that we sang about a calling and answering a calling. In verse 29 of Matthew chapter 14, Jesus said, "Come." That's a calling. Jesus was calling Peter out of the safety of a boat, and he was saying, "Come, step out of the safety and comfort of the boat and step out into the stormy sea and come to me." If you took a survey of America, I'm sure they would tell you that Jesus was the only person who ever walked on water. Is that true? No. Peter walked on water. And that should amaze us. That should amaze us that Peter was able to walk on water. But that is really not the thing that should amaze us the most. It really shouldn't. It shouldn't be surprising to us by the power of Jesus, Peter was able to walk on water. What should amaze us, and something that we can immediately relate to, is that Peter stepped out of the boat. Wow. Wow. Stepped out of the comfort, the safety of the boat and into the storm. It doesn't say that the Holy Spirit lifted him out of the boat and set him down in the waters, like this was not in his control. It was. Peter's faith was strong enough. Is your faith strong enough to step out of the boat? Jesus is telling you, come. Is your faith strong enough to step out of the boat? He did. Peter stepped out of the boat. And what was he able to do? Effectively, he was able to do the impossible. He was able to walk on water. But Peter took that step to step out of the boat. We're going to come back to that in our lesson. On the screen, you'll see a calendar. I thought it would be good to put it in a calendar so you have an idea of the dates where and when we visited Madrid and Canary Islands. We traveled to Madrid on the 14th. We spent a couple days in Madrid. We worshiped with the saints on Sunday the 16th. We spent some time with them as well on the 15th. On the 17th, we traveled to the Canary Islands, and you can see the amount of time that we spent in the Canary Islands on the island of Tenerife. And then on December 1st, we traveled back to the U.S. For those that need a geography lesson, Madrid is a city in Spain, so this is a work in the country of Spain. And you can see Madrid circled in the top right screen up there. And then down further below, off the coast of Africa, are the Canary Islands. And the Canary Islands are a part of the country of Spain. I made a comment about suggesting that they're not really a part of the country of Spain, and I regretted it because they let me know that they are, in fact, a part of the country of Spain. So that's where we went. So you can see the picture of us on the top left there in terms of the team that went to Madrid and the Canary Islands. So you can see Curtis and Rhonda in the picture. The two ladies on the left, Patricia and Nadia, they're both from Argentina, Buenos Aires, Argentina. So they traveled there as co-workers with us in the church work that we did there in Spain. And in the middle there is Mark Morgan. Mark Morgan is from the U.S. He was raised in the U.S. and in South America, so he's completely and fully bilingual. I am not a Spanish speaker. I can greet in Spanish and say goodbye in Spanish and say hi and bye and how are you and hope you're better and et cetera, but when it comes to preaching lessons, I wouldn't be able to preach a lesson in Spanish. So Mark was my primary translator, and then Nadia was a translator for Rhonda. I'd like to answer the question for you that you might have in your mind in terms of why Spain, why Madrid, why the Canary Islands. These congregations that we went to are relatively small, perhaps, in maybe some of the minds of the churches in America. The church in the Canary Islands is approximately 15, and the church there that we visited in Madrid is approximately 25. But why? Well, I want to take us to Acts chapter 8, just briefly in the conversion of the Ethiopian. In Acts chapter 8, in verse 26, now an angel of the Lord said to Philip, rise and go toward the south to the road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. This is a desert place. This is another calling. And he rose and went. He had a calling, so he rose and went. But what I want to point out, we all know the story of the Ethiopian eunuch. Philip met him and helped convert him and baptized him. And that's a great story. But what I believe we forget is where Philip was when he was called. In chapter 8, in verse 4, now those who were scattered went about preaching the word. Philip went down to the city of Samaria and proclaimed to them the Christ. And the crowds, with one accord, paid attention to what was being said by Philip when they heard him and saw the signs that he did. For unclean spirits, crying out with a loud voice, came out of many who had them, and many who were paralyzed or lame were healed. So there was much joy in that city. So Philip is in a large city doing a lot of good work for many people. And I think our common wisdom that we try to use suggests that, well, that's where I should be. I should be where there's a bunch of people because there's more opportunity to preach the word. And these small little groups over here are not as important because I can spend my time touching more people. That's where Philip was. But Philip got a calling to go where? To go to one man. To go see one man. Philip didn't know why, but he accepted that calling. And he went to go see and teach one man. Now it's suggested that did something in terms of spreading the gospel with that Ethiopian. But Philip went to go preach and teach to one man. One soul is important. If this congregation amounted to 3 people, is it important? It's important. But there's a broader story, there's a bigger story that's connected to all this. There are several of you in here that know the Morgans, Phil and Betty Morgan. The story of answering the question, why Spain, why Madrid, why Canary Islands, goes back to Phil and Betty Morgan's history, long history of church work in South America and in Europe, starting back into the mid-60s. They moved their family to South America in Chile. They were there for around 6 to 8 years, and then they moved back to the States, and they continued to do church work in South America. In that same time, while they lived in South America in Chile, the patriarch of the family, Phil Morgan, spent time in Spain teaching and preaching to the congregations throughout Spain, primarily in the Barcelona area. So the Morgan family, as a family, they're well known in Spain among the churches. The story is long. It's 60 years worth of story that I could maybe try to tell you in 3 minutes. But what I want you to know is that's the connection. There was a preacher that Phil trained that ended up going to Barcelona and becoming the preacher in Barcelona. And this is in the 80s or so. And that preacher spent some time in the church in Barcelona and then ended up moving to Canary Islands, Tenerife, and was the preacher there, the local preacher there as well. So that preacher connected to the Morgan family. Phil and Betty Morgan's time in Europe, they spend at least 2 different trips there throughout Spain, teaching and preaching to congregations and teaching them basically a better way, a more sound way, sound doctrine. 25, 30 years goes by, and the church there reaches out to that preacher's daughter and says, we really need somebody to come and help and encourage us. We've received some questionable teaching via Zoom. We just need somebody to come here and encourage us. And so we ended up going in 2024. We took a trip in 2024. This trip here in 2025 is our second trip to Spain and encouraging the churches there. The congregation that reached out to us from the Canary Islands ultimately led to the congregation in Madrid reaching out to us. And what they asked for was somebody to help teach them, encourage them, help them, exhort them, correct them. And that's ultimately the kind of the backstory in terms of why. So the preacher that Phil trained, his daughter called Mark Morgan, Phil's son, Phil's eldest son, and then Mark calls Curtis. So that's how that happened. Mark says, Curtis, I have an idea. He says, I need you to step out of the boat. So I did. I want to introduce you to the 2 primary congregations here that we visited, that we taught with, that we laughed with, that we cried with, that we had tears of joy, tears of pain, shared our personal challenges one to another. Going back to let me just explain. The Church of Christ in Cabo Blanco is the one there on Tenerife. Tenerife is the name of an island, one of the islands in the Canary Islands. And on the right is the congregation in Madrid, Las Rosas. They're in the primary Madrid area. Our calling to go to this trip in 2024 was inspiringly similar to the Macedonian call on Paul's second missionary journey. And you might remember that call, the phrase in Scripture says, come help us. And that summarizes what they were asking of us. Come help us. And so when they said that to us, we stepped out of the boat. When we arrived in Spain in 2024, we found brethren who are determined to remain faithful. Through their fortitude to keep the faith, they reached out for much needed encouragement, guidance, and deeper spiritual teaching. While many calls to church work involve physical needs, the needs of the saints in Madrid and the Canary Islands are spiritual and continue to be so. The congregation, as you can see by the pictures perhaps, is a middle class. They're not rich, but they're certainly not poor either. They have what they need by the will of God. The Lord has blessed these brethren with every physical need. Refreshingly, their true need is spiritual food with a zeal for spiritual growth. As I said, we spent 2 weeks with them in 2024 teaching and exhorting in love. They strongly urged us to return in 2025, so we determined to do so. So we did. Let's talk a little bit about the goal of our trip. The goal of our trip, we never had in our head that a successful trip was baptizing 20 people. The goal of our trip was not to baptize one person. The goal of our trip was to stir up and to strengthen what remains. To stir up and strengthen what remains. To ensure that the church there continues and continues on into the next generation. And this congregation was smart enough to say, we need help with that. We're concerned if this local congregation is going to continue into the next generation. So, we sought out financial support primarily for our travel expenses associated with the trip that we took last year in 2025. We sought out financial support from various individuals and congregations for expenses associated with our trip last year. Finding inspiration in the faithfulness of the brethren and the work in Spain, intimately connected to Mark Morgan's father, Phil. So Mark Morgan, son of Phil, went with us in 2024 and on this trip. He's the one that inspired me to step out of the boat. And including all the Morgan family's legacy of church work, we, the team, we pledge to support these brethren going forward in love, encouragement, prayers, and in our presence. Brother Mark, I want you to listen to this. Brother Mark has committed to move to the Canary Islands this year in 2026. We are passionate about integrating into the daily life of these brethren in Spain. We determined that the only way that we would be able to really make an impact that could possibly, by the will of God, impact the next generation and to continue to strengthen what remains is to put feet permanently there. And so that's what happened. And you were a part of that. You shared in that. You helped to make that happen. Let's talk a little bit more about Spain. The dominant religion there is Catholicism. There is a constant influx of modernism and secular values that are embedded into the culture there. The good news about Spain is it is a basic society that has religious freedom. While it is historically grounded in Catholicism, and you feel that when you're there in a culture perspective, but you also see that in the congregation, because these folks weren't born in the church; they were converted and became a congregation in their a young adult age, and so that culture still is embedded in them. It's part of their DNA. And you see that in terms of how they treat each other and go about things. And so this is a constant battle in terms of how they think about the church, how they think about their own personal religion. All of that plays a part. And then, of course, Canary Islands, because they're part of Spain, very similar, probably more dominant in the Roman Catholicism. Goes back to the 15th century, many centuries. So this is what the church has to battle against in terms of its ability to grow and its ability to bring in the next generation. I want to share with you just briefly the primary teaching activities. I'm going to run through these quickly. I'm not going to go over those or to open the scriptures, but I want to share with you some of the topics we discussed. We talked about the weave of faith and this is in the Madrid. In Madrid, we were there just the one weekend, Saturday and Sunday. But on Sunday, had the opportunity for two sessions. And every time that we spoke, we didn't speak like this, where I speak and you listen. It was always interactive. Every session was interactive. And we ended up doing that, treating it basically like a Bible study, and had some real good conversations and sessions that were very helpful to the congregation there. The weave of faith since creation and into eternity. We run the same race of the past, present, and future saints. Faith bringing tranquility in all circumstances. We talked about in Mark 4, where Jesus was able to sleep in the boat, even though the storms of life were raging all around him. Everybody else was panicked, worried, troubled. Jesus, how can you sleep in the boat during this storm? Well, Jesus knows who's in control. Jesus knows that faith brings tranquility. And so we talked about that. That was an excellent study. And then in the Canary Islands, Philippians chapter 1, how we hold a partnership in the gospel with these U.S. brethren. Philippians chapter 4, making their faithful service known to many. They were overwhelmed by the number of people that we made them known to. Like I'm telling you about these congregations, right? So Madrid, 25 people, Canary Islands, 15. And the amount of individuals and congregations that I reached out to let them know about their presence and praying for them and helping them, and assisting them, whatever way that we can. I calculated the number to be well over 1,000 congregation or individuals, 1,000 individuals that now know about these brethren and are praying for them. They were overwhelmed by that, completely overwhelmed by that, because in their mind, we're nobody. We're literally on an island. So we had sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays as well. I won't go through the entire list here, but you can read it for yourself. Some of the topics that we talked about, touched on. Here's some of the topics that we talked about on the 2 Sundays that we were there. Again, kind of the similar topics that we preached and taught on in Madrid. We also taught here on the island of Tenerife. And then there was a sisters-only study that Rhonda was a part of, where they talked about scriptural empowerment and leadership and their roles. You know, when men are not as ready to take on the spiritual leadership role, what do women do? How do they respond to that? How do they react to that? And then they also shared their favorite meaningful Bible verses, etc. So that was a great opportunity for Rhonda. Rhonda did not go on the trip in 2024, but she went on the trip in 2025. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some faces. Some faces of the people that you helped to show your love, your attention, your care, that you are now aware of their existence. I think seeing faces makes it real. And Ron and I have quickly grown to love and adore these brothers and sisters. As I said, we have literally cried and laughed, tears of joy and tears of pain with these brethren. Top left and bottom right are some of the brethren from Madrid. Top right and bottom left are some of the brothers and sisters from the Canary Islands there in Tenerife. want to share with you some pictures, some more landscape type pictures very quickly, just to kind of give you a feel for what the cities and the area looks like. So this is Madrid. Looks like a typical European city to some extent, crowded to a large degree and busy, lots of people there, lots of old architecture, etc. So now I'll take you to the Canary Islands on Tenerife. Tenerife is an island that has a volcano in the center of it. And all the way around it is volcanic ash. And what you're seeing here at the beach is volcanic ash. The touristy spots of Tenerife where tourists come in, they have brown sand. But that brown sand was brought in on a ship and brought in from Africa. And so they make a nice brown, soft sand for the US and UK tourists that come in and want to be there for vacation. So what the pictures I'm showing you is not that. This is the beaches that the locals would enjoy and see and so forth. But you can see the lava rocks and the volcanic sand that's not really very comfortable to walk on. So you can imagine volcanic ash and walking on it, that's exactly how it feels. And then as you go up the island, it gets a little more mountainous. And then they do have some industry there for vineyards. They have a wine industry. They also have herbal teas and things like that that are part of the island. So a very diverse ecosystem on a single island is pretty amazing. They also have an area once you get up towards the volcano. There's pine trees, and this is where we had basically a congregational picnic together in fellowship, which was wonderful. It was just very enjoyable. And then here's the actual volcano, Mount Tede, and it's actually the highest point in Spain. So 12,198 feet. And this picture on the top right with snow on the volcano is 2 weeks after we left. And what it looked like when we were there is the one on the left, and then the snowpack on the right is just a matter of a couple weeks difference. And then here's just a quick some shots of the city. So this is what the city would look like where the church in Tenerife, Cabo Blanco, the city of or town of Cabo Blanco, on the island of Tenerife, just to give you an idea of what the streets look like and so forth. Typical European type streets. Let's go back to, I'm going to finish up our lesson this morning, going back to Matthew 14. I want to encourage you to reach out to me. Make contact with me. If needed, you can make contact with me through Josh. If you ever want to be a part of something like this, to go on a trip, to answer the call, to step out of the boat, I can likely give you an opportunity. I want you to consider it. Think about it. If it's not next year, if it's not 5 years from now, if it's not 10 years from now, maybe it's 20 years from now. This is one of the events in the last couple of years that has strengthened my faith just as much as when I became an elder. Didn't think that was possible. But when I went on these trips, I'm convinced it did more for me than it did for anybody else, including them. And this is why we are talking about Peter walking on water. Peter was able to walk on water because of his faith drove him to step out of the boat. But here's the part I want to cover with you. Peter was able to walk on water because of the power of our Lord. As long as Peter kept his eyes on Jesus, fixed his eyes on Jesus, he was able to walk on water. But Peter experienced what we all experience. He got distracted by life, by things that really aren't that important. But we get distracted. Peter got distracted. And what happened to Peter when he got distracted and he lost his eyes on Jesus? What happened? He started to sink. Started to sink. That's what happens to us. Yes? Yes. And Peter said, "Save me." What we want to get out of this is what Jesus is promising us. If we step out of the boat, we'll be able to do great things. And when we get distracted, He promises to always save us. But it's our job to step out of the boat in faith. I'm talking about a missionary trip, right? I am. But there's a lot of things that you can do to step out of the boat. You don't have to just step out of the boat to go on a trip somewhere far away. You can step out of the boat to become a Bible class teacher. You can step out of the boat to talk to somebody about Jesus. You can step out of the boat to do something that you know you probably should be doing. But if you do, you'll be able to do great things in His name. And when you get distracted, Lord, save me, Jesus promises to always be there to save you. What do we have to lose? Nothing. Your faith should be telling you that. And Jesus brought Peter back to the boat. He not only saved him out of the water, but He brought him back to the boat. And He didn't just do that, He calmed the sea. He calmed the storm. Why did Peter do all of that? I mean, why did Jesus do all that? Why did He save Peter? Why did He bring him back to the boat? Why did He calm the storms of life? Because Peter chose to step out of the boat. What can you do? What can I do to help encourage the saints in Spain? Reach out to me. These people are as connected electronically as any of us. They're on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, email. They know how to navigate websites and whatever. And they can read a handwritten letter as well. What they need is people that know that they care about them, encourage them. They want to hear from these 1,000 people that know about them. So if it's on your heart to communicate with some of these sisters or brothers, let me know. I can give you that path. This morning we haven't specifically talked about what it takes to become a Christian. If you know what you need to do, we offer the invitation at this time. And if there's those that need the prayers of the congregation, we give you this time as well if you'll come forward as we stand and sing.